Hey guys, welcome back to another super chill tutorial. Today we're going to be making a house plant. I've just been thinking about this for the past 5 minutes now and I really want to do it. So what we're going to do is find an image reference online, kind of go off of that and then build our own little house plant and just set up like a fun little render. Go for either an image or a really simple animation. I really like this style of house plant. These like succulents, I just think they look so cool and I think they would be super easy to design in Blender. Because once you have one leaf design, you can pretty much do the whole thing. I really like this style on the left here. I think those are pretty much perfect. I just have to figure out what the name is, get a few image references, and then we'll go ahead and design a little planter for it, and just pretty much the whole thing in general. These are a pretty good reference. I think those are good. Kind of going for something like maybe this, or maybe that. That one's pretty perfect. I just need a little bit of a better image so I can see the dimension of the actual leaves just a little bit more. There really are pretty plants too. I like this. I kind of like this image right here because it has a variety. So I think that could work. It could work as at least a general reference image. So why don't we use this and then we'll go ahead and design everything from scratch and kind of just set up like a fun little render here. So I'm also live streaming as we go through this, so if I answer any questions, I apologize, guys, but I'm gonna try to keep it super chill. Let me go ahead and save this image to my desktop, and then I'm gonna open my app that is called PureRef. So let's go ahead and open that up, and I'm just gonna put it over here, and we are going to do like a side-by-side thing here. I'm gonna drop my image in and just use it as a reference. So I think I'm going to kind of base it off of maybe like this one in the middle here, something like that. So let's go ahead and open up a new Blender document. And I'm just going to kind of delete everything off the bat. And I'm just going to save this to my desktop as succulent plant. I believe that is what the plant is called. And then I'm going to kind of snap this to the side of my screen so that we can have our image reference on the right. Cool. And if we need to add more image references, we can. So maybe I'll just grab one more quick reference image. I really liked this one, so I'm going to go ahead and save that to the desktop as well. And then once I have that saved to my desktop, I'm just going to drag that into here. And as you can see, I have both of my image references right here for us to refer to as we go. Cool. Now I have Blender open. Again, I'm going to snap that to the left here, and we are good to go. So the first thing I want to do is actually model my actual plant and the planter. So I think the planter will probably be easier to model than anything else. So I'm just going to add in a cylinder. So we have a cylinder right here. Make sure everybody that is on the live stream can see what I'm doing. Perfect. And then I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to probably tab into edit mode, go to my top face and just inset it so we can extrude it down. So I'm just going to inset it a little bit, probably twice. Yeah, I'm going to inset it one more time. And then I'm going to take this EZ to extrude it down. Oops, not snapping to Z. EZ. Not sure why it's not doing that. I'll just move it down. That's fine. GZ works too. That's fine. I'm actually going to expand Blender a little bit so it's a little bit easier to see here. And I'm going to hop into my ghost mode. And then I'm going to move it down on the Z axis. Perfect. All right, now let's tab out of edit mode. Get out of X-ray mode, go to our modifiers, add in a little bevel modifier, add in an edge split modifier, and then a subdivision surface modifier. Shade smooth, and just kind of mess with that bevel a little bit until we have something we really like. I think that looks pretty good. Oops, hold on guys. There we go. I think that looks good, more or less. I'm pretty happy with that. If you wanted to make it more curved around the top, you could grab that top edge loop. So you want to go ahead and select that edge. Go to Select, Loops, Edge Loops, and then just bring it down a little bit, kind of like that on the Z-axis. And then again, you can adjust your segments here. Object, apply scale if you need to. I think that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. Let's go ahead and bring it up on the Z-axis so it's barely touching the bottom there. And let's go ahead and add in a plane. So we have a floor for our scene here. And I'm just going to head over to cycles just so that we have a nice scene set up. I'm going to add in an environment texture. You're not going to see anything yet because we don't have, we're not on rendered view. But I'm going to go to my HDRI folder and I'm just going to pick a nice outdoor scene. I think I like this one. So let's go ahead and check that in rendered view. It looks like we have everything set up. And then for our planter, I think I might just go with kind of a slight metallic shader. So I'm going to turn up my metallic and just do like a low roughness. That looks pretty good. And then for our floor here, we can come back to that later. I'm pretty happy with what we have so far. And we can, of course, adjust the angle of our lighting and everything like that later. If we really want to match our reference image, we can do a nice darker black shader like that. So this is good for our container, for our plant. And now let's go ahead and design each of these leaves. And we're going to duplicate them within our little cup here to actually create our plant. But before we do that, let me duplicate this plane, move it up on the z-axis, and I'm going to scale it down so that it's barely touching the edges. And what I want this to be is kind of that dirt barrier. Now we should be able to add a bevel modifier to this, or not. So I think what I'm going to do is tab into edit mode, or sorry, I'm going to tab edit mode, guys. I'm going to add a bevel modifier and click on vertices, and we should be able to, there we go. See how we can now bevel those edges there? Apologies for that. We should be able to bevel this to the perfect circle basically. So I'm just going to set it to like 1.2, up those subdivisions, and make sure it's just a little bit below our surface. So now if we look, we have this piece right here. So I'm just going to give this just a nice brown shader for reference right now. We can come back to it later. And of course brown is just basically dark orange, more or less. So I think that looks good. We'll just up that roughness. And now we kind of have a base for our actual, our planter there, our little leaves that we're going to construct right now. So to construct these leaves, I'm actually going to be sculpting these leaves. So I'm going to go ahead and start with a mesh. I'm just going to do an icosphere. I'm going to bring that up, and then I'm going to hop into sculpting. I am going to just have my smooth brush ready. I'm going to click on remesh right here and just do 0.01. Click on remesh. Check out that geometry. We have a lot of geometry to work with now, so we can pretty much fine tune this however we like. And what I think I'm going to do is just kind of go to my elastic deform, kind of raise the radius up, and start kind of forming the shape that I think looks pretty much like one of these leaves. And I'm pretty much just doing this from scratch, just based on my reference image and how I think this should look. And we can make a couple of variations of these if we want. As you can see, if you really look closely at our reference images, they look like they're concaved. So they kind of concave in the middle like this, and we're going to smooth this out in just a second here. And then at the end, it kind of points out a little bit. So I think that looks pretty good. And again, we can adjust the sizing as well. Once we get out of sculpting mode, let me just go ahead and smooth all of this out. As you can see, I'm smoothing this out with the smooth tool. And then we can remesh it one more time at a lower value. So instead of 0.01, maybe like 0.03, remesh that. And then keep smoothing that out a little bit more. Again, you guys can probably use any shape you want to create this. I just thought this looked good enough for what I was doing. So this looks pretty good for the leaf. I'm going to continue to kind of give that a nice concave shape. I'm just using the elastic deform here. You guys can use whatever you like. And of course, you can go to the very top here and make that even more pointed if you choose to do that. I think that looks pretty good. You can create a few different variations of these. You can smooth it out even more. And then something you can do is if you go back to the layout, you should be able to just shade that smooth. Perfect. And now I'm going to scale that down. And I'm just going to put it in the center right here. If I go to my top-down view, just kind of put it towards the center. And I'm going to scale it on the x-axis. And I'm probably going to make the bottom start with these longer ones and then scale them up as I go. So I'm just going to just be duplicating these, and I'm going to be rotating them. And I'm just going to be adjusting that Z value to kind of place them on top of one another. I might even SZ, scale them on the Z axis as well. And again, you can rotate these however you like. Don't mind if they overlap too much. I think that looks pretty good. And again, I'm going to select both of those, go to my top-down view, and I'm just going to rotate them a bit. G to move, R to rotate, G to move. I'm just going to rotate this one. And I'm just going to start like building out how I think this should look. I think so far so good. Again, you guys can rotate this however you'd like. I think that looks pretty good. Let's just go to rendered view real quick. Now these obviously don't have any type of shader on them yet. So we're going to actually add our own custom gradient shader, which I'm really excited to show you guys because it's actually really, really simple to do. I think this is starting to look really, really good. You guys can add as many of these as you want. I'm thinking that I'll probably add like 5 or 6 and just make sure they don't overlap too much. And if you guys want to create more variation, just head over to the Sculpting tab and you can do that as well. I'm liking how this is looking so far. Just be careful with those overlaps because you'll get something like this. So just make sure you're rotating those so that you don't get that harsh overlap as I have right there. Yeah, just be really, really careful. This is looking good, and as we continue to go up, I'm going to actually duplicate these, and I am going to scale them down on like the Z-axis and our other axes. Oh my god, axes, what am I saying? Anyway, you guys get the idea. So all I'm doing is just duplicating and rotating this, and then we're going to add our own custom shader once we're ready. So I'm either going to speed this part up, or you guys just can watch as I continue to place these objects. Again, you can try to make them kind of go towards the center here. As they get smaller, you're going to want to find a way to kind of close that gap in the middle because you don't want it to just be wide open. So I'm just using the free rotate right now to kind of get the desired result of what I want. I think that's looking pretty good. And I'm just going to continue to duplicate this, maybe shrink it down just a little bit more, right? Kind of just covering my tracks as I go. And I think this looks really good. And what's great is when we're all done this, we can go ahead and duplicate this entire thing and completely change our shader as well. So again, I'm just creating some variation with these, kind of moving them around. And I think they look really, really good. I'm excited to see what this is going to look like once we add our custom shader for our plant. Again, trying to make sure they don't overlap too much. And I think I'm going to go one more level up, but I'm going to really start to scale these down a lot. Again, I'm in my top-down view as I do this because I find it's easier, and then I double check by rotating around my scene to make sure nothing is overlapping too much. I think that looks pretty good. I'm gonna make this one just a little bit thinner than the other ones. And again, you guys can decide how much you want these to bow out as well and how much you want them to rotate. I'm kind of just going for what I think looks good. And then as you get to the center here, you can start to decrease the size even more. But this is starting to look like really, really good. As you can see, nothing's really touching in the middle there, so you guys can bring these in a little bit closer. Again, you don't want them to overlap too much, but you do want this thing to kind of come to an end here at some point. So I think I'm kind of getting to that point. So I'm probably going to have them overlap a little bit on the top here. But I do think this is going to turn out really, really nice when we're done. So this is looking really cool. I'm pretty happy with this. And I think what I might even do is go to my side view and just SZ, kind of bring them in, rotate them a little bit. This one can probably come in quite a bit. This is looking pretty cool. And again, this is very organic. You guys can decide to do this however you want. I'm trying to make it look pretty natural. If we go to our rendered view, you're going to see it does look pretty cool. You guys can literally duplicate this as many times as you like. I think this looks really awesome. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a custom shader for our plant here. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at this. It looks like it's kind of like a yellowish green all the way up to sort of like a red on the tip. So I'm going to try my best to get this correct. I'm going to go ahead to my shading tab. I'm going to kind of single out one of these leaves here, go to my rendered view, and then I'm going to create a new shader. So we're just going to go with the default principled BSDF for now. I'm going to have my reference image up over there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a gradient texture, color ramp. And then I'm going to add in a mapping. And guys, I know what you're going to say. Kenny, why don't you have Node Wrangler? I do, I just don't really use it. And then we're going to do a texture coordinate. And we're just going to plug everything in like this. We're going to plug in the generated to the vector, vector to the FAC, the color to the color. Sorry, I don't know why I put this gradient texture in there because I don't think we need it. Should be good. As you can see, we have that gradient on there. So let's go ahead and decide on some colors here. Instead of black, I'm going to go with a very light greenish yellow. And then for our white, I'm going to choose red, and then we're going to choose some colors in between there. Kind of like maybe a burnt like orange red kind of type of color. That looks pretty good. And then we're going to go to object. And then this is where you kind of have to fiddle around with this. And this is going to be a little tricky to get exactly right here. So we're going to go ahead and adjust the rotation a bit. Oops. Until we get what we like. That looks pretty good. You might have to do this for these individually. I'm sure you could accomplish this with geometry nodes, but I'm starting to like the way that looks right there. As you can see, we have that red coming into the side here with our green. And then I'm going to add one more color, and this is going to be like a solid green color. So I'm going to make that yellow towards the bottom. This green, I'll make this a little bit lighter. That looks pretty good. Again, we're at like a 45-degree angle here. Now I'd be curious to see what the rest of these look like with this shader, so I'm just going to copy those over. Control L is the shortcut for that. And as you can see, we have a nice shader for all of the tips of our the red on those leaves. That looks really good. And I really like the way that came out. I was actually surprised at how well that shader came out and how quickly it did. And again, you can come in here and you can adjust the brightness level of this as well. I actually think that looks really, really cool. I'm very, very happy with the way that came out. And again, this is going to make for a great tutorial because we're teaching a lot of different concepts here. So let's go back to the layout tab, hop into our camera here, and then let's click on our camera and let's just set up a nice little orthographic scene here. I'm going to do 1080 by 1920 for our dimensions there. And then I think what I'm going to do is kind of just start messing with our lighting. But before I do that, let me click on our floor plane and just add a nice metallic shader with a kind of like a lower roughness. That looks pretty good. And already we have a really, really nice render here. I'm just going to kind of mess with the roughness of our planter as well. I'm pretty happy with this so far. I'm also kind of imagining the plant just floating above the ground just a little bit. I think that looks really, really nice. Let's hop over to the shading tab, open up our world properties, and then let's just add in a mapping and a texture coordinate node. I'm in all caps. Why I'm in all caps. Generate it to vector, and then the vector to the vector. And then we're just going to go ahead and snap to our camera view and adjust our lighting with the Z axis until we find something we like. I kind of like this nice side angle light right there. Let's go ahead and see what it looks like from the back angle. Looks good. And then I kind of like this where it's kind of coming through on the side there. But here's what I'm thinking. Now that I'm seeing this light come from the back here, why don't we adjust our shader? Okay, so let's go ahead back to our object with one of these petals selected. Let's go ahead and give this a slightly transmissive subsurface scattering look. So I'm going to put 1 for subsurface, and then I'm actually going to plug in the color to our subsurface color. And already you can see we have this nice subsurface effect that worked out very, very well. Subsurface IOR, I'll set that to 2. And then for the radius, we want to go ahead and pop this open, and let's just test some different values here. I'm just going to put 0 for these last 2 values and 1 for this top value. And now you see that this light that's coming through looks super, super awesome. And again, we can hop back over to our world settings, and we can adjust the value of this, of where the light's coming from. I actually like when the light is coming from slightly behind, so I think I'm going to keep it how it is at the moment. And then I'm going to go ahead and kind of just mess with the roughness of the floor a little bit. Something like that might be perfect. I just think this is looking really, really awesome. And again, guys, you can adjust the brown of the dirt inside, but I am just super happy with how this turned out. The only other thing I could think of that would make this any better is some depth of field, but since we don't really have a texture on the ground, we don't really need depth of field. But the more I think about it, what if we hid the floor? Again, we're just kind of freestyling here, right? And then instead of an orthographic camera, we went with a perspective camera. And then we went ahead and tilted that up a bit, brought it down on the Z-axis. Or maybe we keep it where it is and just add some really intense depth of field. Just set it to 0.1. And already you're getting this nice fuzzy look around here that just looks so good. I'm going to try 0.2. And then I'm going to also select this center petal here. And that looks really good. I'm very, very happy with that. Again, we want to choose a 45-degree angle. And then for our transforms up here, we're just going to do 7 and -7 for the camera. Just keep it nice and centered within our scene here. And this looks really, really good. I'm also going to go to viewport display and turn this value up so we can see what we're actually looking at here. I think this looks really, really nice. Very, very happy with the result. And the only other thing I can think of that could possibly make this better is if we added in a sphere, scaled it up, and we're going to go ahead and zoom out here. We're going to scale it up beyond our camera, and we're just going to add in a glass shader, shade that smooth, go back to rendered view, and then just mess around with this roughness until we find something we like. Let me do 1.2 for that IOR on that glass. And as you can see, when we adjust this roughness, we're also adjusting the background and how it is actually getting blurred. I think 0.18 looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead over to our color management, and I am going to raise our exposure a bit. And then for our look, I'm going to do medium high contrast. I think this is looking really awesome. Maybe we can mess with the color of this pot just a little bit. Guys, this turned out so good, and we put in almost minimal effort. Another thing we could do is add a bump node to our leaves, give them a little bit more realism. Excuse me, realism. What am I saying? Realism. Again, we can try for like a dark brown kind of color. You don't have to. That is totally up to you. I don't mind black. I actually think it looks pretty good. This is like a darker brown kind of color with like a high roughness. Again, you can do low roughness and make it very metallic. That is totally up to you. I think this is looking awesome. Let's go ahead and head over to our render settings. We're going to do 300 samples, denoising. We're going to choose optics. And then I'm going to go over to my light paths, and I am going to choose, I'm just going to make all these 5 for a second and see what that looks like. They all add up to 25. I think it looks pretty good. You can click on Fast GI approximation, but I think it kills the render. I'm going to turn off my caustics. And as you can see, that destroys our plant look, so I'm going to turn those back on. Did not realize you needed those on, but you do for your subsurface scattering. And let's go ahead and zoom in with our camera just a little bit. Let's give this an 85mm lens. Nope, let's try 60. That looks good, and let's go ahead and click render and see what we have. Our plane is still not hidden. Let's go ahead and hide the plane from the render, and let's render our image. Looks like it's going to take about 15 seconds. Let's just go ahead and see what we're getting here. And again, this is completely made from scratch in Blender. The only asset we're really using is our HDRI. This looks awesome. I think this turned out really, really good. The only other thing I'd probably change is just messing around with this color here. Maybe upping the roughness on this material. And again, you guys can play around with this node setup. I think this turned out super awesome. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Consider subscribing to the channel if you like this video, if you found this helpful. Definitely go check out my Discord. There is a lot of people in there. I think we're growing to almost 300 people. Check me out on Instagram, and consider supporting me on Patreon if you like these videos and you want full access to the tutorial files so that you don't have to watch the whole tutorial. As well as another tier above that will be access to my actual client files. So, something to consider if you guys are interested. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a great day.